Hey guys! Tonight, we're not going to dive into a saga of war or a labyrinth of political conspiracy. Instead, we're going to do something slower, more methodical. We're going to spend a day, a single, utterly ordinary day, in the life of a god-king. We're going to follow the Pharaoh of Egypt. Not during a crisis, not on a day of triumph, but on a perfectly standard, bureaucratic, ritual-saturated Tuesday in, say, 2500 BCE. The goal isn't excitement. The goal is immersion into a mindset so alien, a routine so rigid, that it might just lull you into a different state of consciousness altogether. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let your mind drift back to a time when the sun didn't just rise, it was reborn by the meticulous morning routine of a living deity. Our subject, for narrative purposes, is a king we'll call Nebmeter. It's a fine, sturdy throne name, meaning, the Lord of Truth is Re. He's in his 30s, theoretically in his prime. He rules from the royal residence at Memphis, a sprawling complex of white walls and bustling courtyards that smells perpetually of baking bread, incense, and the distant, muddy scent of the Nile. His pyramid, because of course he has one, is under construction a few miles away. It's a constant, dusty hum on the horizon, the background noise of his reign. His day begins, as all things do in Egypt, in the dark. Not at a reasonable hour, mind you. We're talking deep in the final watch of the night, when the stars are still brutally clear in a sky not yet bleached by the sun. He doesn't wake to an alarm, but to the silent, reverent presence of his chief of the scented oils and keeper of the royal wig. The concept of personal space does not exist for the pharaoh. He is a state asset. His body is a ritual object. From the moment his eyes open, he is on display, and every action is a sacrament. The first ritual is, bluntly, waking up. But this isn't stretching and yawning. A priest, his voice a soft monotone, might recite spells from the pyramid texts near the royal bedchamber, defending the king's spiritual form from the dangers of the night. Awake in peace, O pure one. Awake in peace. Nebmeter rises. He is attended by a small army of servants who have been standing in silent readiness for hours. They don't speak unless spoken to. Their footfalls on the alabaster floor are whispers. The morning ablutions are next, and they are a production. He is washed with water from the Nile, the sacred river that is his bloodstream. His teeth are cleaned with a frayed stick and a paste of ash and powdered ox hooves. His body is anointed with oils, linseed, moringa, sesame, each scent carrying symbolic weight, each application a reenactment of the gods anointing Horus for kingship. Then comes the makeup. The iconic eyeliner, kohl, is applied not for fashion, but to ward off evil eye infections and the glare of the sun. It's practical, in a deeply mystical way. His face is painted with ochre and powdered malachite. He is being assembled, piece by symbolic piece. Now, the wardrobe. Egyptian linen is famously fine, but the pharaoh's is so sheer it's practically a thought. He is draped, folded, and pleated into his shanti, the royal kilt. The tying of the knot is itself a ritual, a knot of Isis for protection. Over this goes a leopard skin cloak, draped over one shoulder, a symbol of his role as the high priest of every temple in Egypt. Then, the jewelry, a collar of faience beads and gold, heavy enough to be a physical reminder of his duty. Bracelets, armlets, anklets. Each piece is a prayer, a shield, a statement. Finally, the crown, or, more accurately, the selection of a crown. This is a major decision, the first of hundreds he will make today with cosmic significance. Will it be the hedjet, the white crown of Upper Egypt? The deshret, the red crown of Lower Egypt? Or the mighty Piz Chent, the double crown unifying both? He chooses the Piz Chent. It's a political statement, a theological statement, and a fashion statement all in one. It's also, by all accounts, spectacularly uncomfortable and top-heavy. But a god does not complain about neck strain. Thus assembled, a walking, breathing monument, he is ready for the first and most important act of his day, the morning rituals. He proceeds in a slow, stately procession from his palace to the temple complex. He is preceded by guards whose job is less about security and more about clearing the path of spiritually impure commoners. Priests walk backward before him, sprinkling the ground with milk and scattering natron salt. The air is thick with the smoke of Kaifi incense, a sweet, soporific blend of pine resin, raisins, and honey. He enters the temple, passing through pylons and courtyards that grow progressively darker and more restricted. The noise of the city fades. Here, in the cool, dark sanctuary, the heart of the world waits. The cult statue of the god, likely Herakti, the sun god fused with the king's own patron, Horus. The statue is housed in a small shrine, a naos. The rituals are precise, secret, and mind-numbingly repetitive. They haven't changed in centuries. The priestly manuals are explicit. The king, or the high priest acting as his literal stand-in, will break the clay seal on the shrine. He will pull back the bolts, a symbolic unlocking of the dawn. He will open the doors to reveal the god within. The statue, perhaps of gold and lapis lazuli, is there in the gloom. The king will then proceed to wake the god. He will cleanse the statue with water, dress it in fresh linen, anoint it with oils, and present offerings of food, drink, and incense. He will then recite hymns, praising the god's power and, not so subtly, reminding the god of the king's own devotion and his role as the god's representative on earth. This entire ceremony is a metaphysical feedback loop. By tending to the god, the king ensures the sun rises, the Nile floods, and Ma'at, the cosmic order of truth and balance, is maintained. And by maintaining Ma'at, the king proves he is a worthy king, deserving of the god's favor. It's a perfect, closed system of mutual obligation. There's no room for innovation. A single misspoken word in the hymn, a single piece of linen folded in the wrong order, could theoretically plunge the universe into chaos. No pressure. After perhaps an hour of this intense, cloistered ritual, the king emerges from the temple sanctuary, blinking in the now bright sunlight. The sun has officially risen. He has done his primary job. The cosmos will continue for another day. He can now move on to his secondary, more mundane duties, running a civilization. Part 2. The bureaucracy of the divine. Having successfully rebooted the universe for another 24-hour cycle, Nebmeter now transitions from high priest to chief executive officer. The setting shifts from the incense-heavy silence of the sanctuary to the marginally more lively atmosphere of the audience hall. This is the Pharaoh, the great house, from which we get the word Pharaoh. It's less a throne room in the medieval European sense and more a grand, columned receiving area where business is conducted with a layer of divine sheen. He takes his seat on a throne that is, like everything else, a monument. It's often flanked by lion or sphinx motifs, symbols of his power. The arms are carved as intertwined lotus and papyrus plants, representing the unified two lands. He holds the crook and flail against his chest, symbols of his duty to shepherd his people and to, well, flail his enemies, I suppose. He doesn't look relaxed. The throne is not built for comfort. It is built for iconography. The first order of business is the vizier's report. The vizier is the pharaoh's right-hand man, the grand administrator who filters the tidal wave of state minutiae up to the god-king. He enters, performs the full prostration, forehead to the floor, and then launches into a litany that would put any modern corporate meeting to sleep in seconds. Grain yields from the 17th Upper Egyptian Nome. The progress on the new irrigation canal near Hermopolis. A dispute between two mayors over the boundaries of a barley field. The arrival of a timber shipment from Byblos for the Pyramids Causeway. The petition from a temple in Abydos for an increase in its daily bread and beer allotment. Nebmeter listens. Or at least, he presents the appearance of listening. His face is a placid, painted mask. His role here is not to get bogged down in details. It is to embody Ma'at, justice and order. He will occasionally lift a hand, a simple gesture. This might mean, approved, denied, or, refer it to the treasury scribes for review. His words are few, measured, and instantly become law. A scribe, kneeling at the foot of the dais, frantically scratches every utterance onto a papyrus scroll with a reed pen. This is the birth of a royal decree. It will be copied, sent out, and become the bureaucratic gospel for some minor official in a riverbank town 100 miles south. Next might come a few select audiences. A victorious general from a skirmish in Nubia presents a handful of bound captives and a pile of loot, ebony, ivory, gold dust. The king offers a few words of praise, rewards the general with a golden collar of honor, and the captives are marched off to a life of hard labor, probably on that pyramid. A foreign envoy from the land of Punt, smelling of myrrh and looking distinctly uncomfortable in the dry heat, offers exotic gifts, live baboons, incense trees in pots, sacks of aromatic resin. The king accepts these as his divine due, the natural tribute of the world to its center. Then, perhaps, a bit of adjudication. A truly knotty case that the lower courts couldn't solve is brought before the living God. Two wealthy landowners are in a vicious, decade-long feud over a will. The scrolls of testimony are piled high. The vizier summarizes the arguments. The king listens, his expression inscrutable behind the formal beard strap attached to his crown. He doesn't need to consult a law code. He is the law. He is the embodiment of justice. After a ponderous silence, he points the flail at one of the men. A single word, yours. The case is closed. The decision is perfect, because it is divine. The losing party, of course, might privately think the decision was perfectly stupid, but he'd never dare say it. To question the pharaoh's judgment is to question the fabric of reality. By now, the sun is climbing high. The temperature in the audience hall is rising. The king has been sitting in full regalia for hours. A lesser mortal would be sweating through his linen, dreaming of a nap. But the schedule is relentless. It's time for a symbolic act of kingship, the royal inspection. This could take many forms. Sometimes it was a literal walkabout. More often, it was a staged display. He might be carried in a litter to the royal docks to inspect the fleet of royal barges. Or he might visit the royal workshops, the atelier where sculptors chip away at a giant granite statue of his own face, where jewelers weave gold into pectorals, where carpenters build furniture inlaid with ivory. His presence is a blessing and a motivator. The workers, covered in stone dust or sawdust, would prostrate themselves as he passed. He would nod, say nothing, and move on. His mere gaze was considered an act of creation and approval. Or, the inspection might be focused on the great project, his pyramid. We'll take this option, for the view is more dramatic. His litter is carried out of the palace grounds, through the streets of Memphis. The people, warned by heralds, line the route, pressing their foreheads to the ground. They are not allowed to look upon his face directly. To them, he is a glittering, distant mirage, a flash of gold and white linen, a scent of sacred oils carried on the breeze. The sight, when he arrives, is a study in organized chaos. It's a city unto itself. Quarries, ramps, barracks for workers, bakeries churning out thousands of loaves a day, breweries producing a river of beer. The din is tremendous, the clang of copper chisels on stone, the shouts of foremen, the groan of wooden sledges hauling multi-ton blocks up earthen ramps. The air is a permanent fog of limestone dust. The chief architect and the head priest scramble to meet him. They unroll papyrus plans on a shaded table. They point, they explain progress. The king ascends a specially built viewing platform. He looks out over the geometric mountain being built to house his corpse for eternity. He does not see backbreaking labor. He sees an act of devotion, a machine for resurrection, a mountain that will launch his soul to the stars. He might order a slight adjustment to the angle of a causeway, or decree an extra ration of beer and meat for the work gangs. It's a managerial decision wrapped in a theological imperative. He stays just long enough for his presence to be felt, for the workers to see their living God taking an interest, and then he is carried back to the palace. The dust of mortality is ritually washed from his feet upon his return. It is now approaching midday. The sun is at its peak, a crushing, white-hot force. Even the gods, presumably, take a lunch break. Part 3. The afternoon of offerings and obligations. Returning to the cool, shaded recesses of the palace, Nebmeter undergoes a partial demobilization. The heaviest crown and jewelry might be removed, replaced with lighter pieces. But he is never just a man in his undershirt. Even at his most relaxed, he is a symbol. The afternoon is a blend of the personal, the political, and the perpetually pious. First, sustenance. The pharaoh eats. But his meal is another ritual. He doesn't just grab a fig from a bowl. He dines alone, or perhaps with his great royal wife, in a private chamber. The food is prepared in the palace kitchens under the watchful eyes of priests who ensure its ritual purity. It is a sprawling affair, dozens of dishes. Roast duck, grilled Nile perch, lentils, cucumbers, onions, dates, honey cakes, melons, and of course, vast quantities of bread and beer, the true staples of Egyptian life. But here's the cosmic catch. He doesn't actually consume the physical essence of most of this food. The offerings are presented. He may taste a few symbolic morsels. But the bulk of it, after being in the royal presence, becomes *kapesh, spiritually charged. It is then redistributed. Down the chain it goes, to the high officials who attended the morning audience, to the temple priests, to the palace guards and scribes. To receive the king's leftover food is a great honor and a tangible piece of his divine power. So, while the common people are eating their barley bread and onion, the elite of Memphis are literally dining on the pharaoh's blessed leftovers. It's a theological sound recycling program. After the meal, there might be a brief period reserved for what we could loosely call family time. This is not playing catch with the kids. This is a state function. He might visit the royal nursery to inspect his children, the royal offspring who are themselves semi-divine assets. Their tutor, a stern scribe, would have them recite lessons. The king would listen, offer a nod of approval. He might visit the apartments of his great royal wife, who is often also his sister or half-sister, because keeping the divine bloodline pure was less about romance and more about spiritual genetics. Their conversation would be formal, likely revolving around the marriage prospects of a daughter or the military training of the crown prince. Affection, if it exists, is buried deep beneath layers of protocol and dynasty. Then, it's back to work. The afternoon session is often for deeper consultation. This is when he might meet privately with his closest advisors, the vizier, the treasurer, the overseer of the army, the chief lector priest. Here, in a less formal setting, the realpolitik is discussed. The simmering rebellion in a remote oasis. The worrying reports of lower Nile inundations. The delicate balancing act of keeping the powerful priesthoods of Amun at Thebes happy while his own power base is here in Memphis. These are the human problems that even a god-king must navigate. He listens to arguments, debates. His decisions here will shape the policies enacted in tomorrow's grand audience. Interspersed with this are more religious obligations. There are minor rituals throughout the day, the noon liturgy to Re, the evening ritual to the setting sun. He might not personally attend every one, but his presence is invoked. A priest will stand in for him, declaring, for the king. As he makes an offering, the king's divinity is a franchise, and the temples are its outlets, operating round the clock on his spiritual behalf. He might also use this time for his own edification. Scribes might read to him from the royal archives, reports from expeditions, copies of correspondence with foreign kings, the annals of his predecessors. He is expected to know the history of his office, to learn from the successes and failures of the gods who came before him. Or, he might practice a royal skill, archery from a chariot, perhaps, or lion hunting in the royal preserves. These aren't hobbies, they are displays of the king's martial and virile power, necessary to maintain the image of the strong bull, the conqueror of chaos. As the sun begins its descent, painting the sky in shades of ochre and gold, the pace slows. The most physically demanding part of the day is over. But the most symbolically delicate part is about to begin, the transition from the day king to the night king, from the solar deity to the underworld traveler. Part 4. The dusk of the god and the weight of the night. The angle of the light changes. The long shadows of the palace columns stretch across the courtyards. In Egypt, dusk isn't just the end of the day, it's a vulnerable threshold, a time when the forces of chaos, symbolized by the serpent Apophis, might attack the bark of the sun god as it journeys through the underworld. For the pharaoh, the living Horus and son of Re, this time is charged with personal and cosmic significance. The final official act of the day is often another temple visit, this time for the evening ritual. The procession is more subdued than the mornings. The hymns are different, focused on protection, on the closing of the day, on the safe passage of the sun. In the temple sanctuary, the ritual is essentially the morning ritual in reverse. The cult statue is undressed, resealed in its shrine. The doors of the naos are closed, the bolts thrown, a new clay seal applied. The god is put to bed. The king has effectively tucked the sun in for its perilous nocturnal journey. His job as the sustainer of the cosmic cycle is, for now, complete. He returns to the palace as the first stars prick through the violet haze. The evening meal is a quieter, more private version of the afternoon feast. Afterwards, there might be a moment of diversion. This is the closest he gets to leisure. Musicians might play the gentle, haunting notes of the harp and flute. Live dancers might perform, their movements stylized and graceful. A court poet might recite a composition in the king's honor. But even this is charged with meaning. The songs or hymns are epic tales of past pharaohs' triumphs. The dances are often ritualistic. Nothing is frivolous. Everything reinforces Ma'at, kingship, and divine order. He might spend time with a favored wife or concubine from his harem. But again, this is rarely about passion. It is about duty, producing more royal children to secure the dynasty. Even intimacy is a state function, often preceded and followed by purificatory rites and spells for conceiving a healthy heir. Finally, the time comes for the king to retire. The process of unmasking the god Begi. And so there he is, Ar-Nebmeter, standing in the filtered dawn light of the temple's inner court. The air, which moments ago was still and sacred, now carries the distant, muffled sounds of the world waking up, the lowing of cattle brought for sacrifice, the slap of sandals on stone in the outer precincts, the soft chant of lesser priests in adjacent shrines. His primary function, the kickstarting of the solar engine, is complete. But the performance, the divine pageant, must continue without a single missed cue. You see, the pharaoh wasn't just a participant in these rituals, he was the lead actor in a play where the script was literally carved in stone, and the audience was every force in the universe. The morning ritual we just witnessed wasn't a one-off. It was a microcosm of his entire reign, his entire existence. Every action, from breaking the seal to presenting the linen, was a metaphor. Cleansing the statue with water. That was the Nile's inundation, the lifeblood of Egypt, flowing from his hands. Offering food. That was his role as the provider for all creation. The incense smoke. The sweet smell of Ma'at, cosmic order, permeating reality because of his efforts. And this brings us to the profound, and frankly exhausting, psychological core of Egyptian kingship. The pharaoh was not merely considered close to the gods. He was, in very specific and context-dependent ways, an actual god. He was Horus, the falcon god, the living embodiment of rightful rule. Upon his death, he would become Osiris, the lord of the underworld and the resurrected king. But in life, he was also the son of Re, the physical offspring of the sun god himself. This wasn't just flowery political poetry. The theology was concrete. His divine essence was as real as his royal scepter. Which meant his body was not entirely his own. It was a vessel, a conduit. His morning routine of washing, anointing, and painting was less about hygiene and more about ritual maintenance of a holy object. The kohl around his eyes wasn't just to reduce glare, it recreated the sacred eye of Horus, warding off evil. The green malachite paste on his skin evoked the fertility of the Nile's banks and the flesh of the god Osiris himself. He was being painted into the cosmic landscape. Now, let's consider the sheer loneliness of this. Everyone in his presence is prostrate. Their faces are in the dirt. They speak to the floor. He makes decisions that feel, to him, like the hesitant judgments of a man, weighing a vizier's advice, remembering the outcome of a similar dispute from his father's time, sensing the mood of a foreign envoy. But to everyone else in the room, his decisions are oracles. They are the unimpeachable, perfect judgments of a deity who sees all truth. The pressure to never be seen as uncertain, as weak, as human, must have been a constant, low-grade torment. Of course he was. He couldn't even scratch his nose without a priest possibly interpreting it as a divine sign. After the temple, the procession back to the palace would reform. It was a mobile island of sanctity moving through the secular world. Heralds would run ahead, calling for the people to avert their eyes, to clear the path. The ordinary citizens of Memphis would hear the commotion and know the god was passing by. They'd press themselves against walls, faces averted. For them, a direct glance at the living Horus could be dangerous, too much divine power for a mortal to handle. They might catch a peripheral glimpse. The glint of gold, the flutter of fine linen, the shimmer of the leopard skin. They'd smell the trailing scent of the temple incense clinging to the procession. That was their interaction with their king. A scent, a sound, a rumor of glory. He would re-enter the palace not as a man coming home, but as a central power source returning to its generator. The palace wasn't a home, it was the Pharaoh, the great house, the administrative engine of the two lands. And his first port of call, before even that throne in the audience hall, was often a smaller, more intimate chamber for what we might call the divine debrief. Here, he might finally get to sit without the double crown, though never without a simpler diadem or headcloth. The vizier and a few top officials would join him. This was the pre-meeting before the public meeting. The vizier would run through the docket for the public audience, giving the king a heads up on the trickier issues. The mayor of Elephantine is petitioning for tax relief due to a poor harvest. The evidence is strong, but granting it may set a precedent the treasury fears. Or, the envoy from Retinue is bringing gifts but will surely ask for military support against his neighbors. Our generals advise caution. In this room, Nebmutter could maybe, just maybe, let a fraction of his mask slip. He could ask a question without it being a divine pronouncement. He could say, "What did my father do in a case like this?" Or, "How much would that tax relief actually cost us?" He was getting his talking points from the divine scriptwriter. This was the human scaffolding behind the godly facade. It was the essential, mundane work of governance that kept the ideology afloat. Because a king who made too many, divinely inspired, decisions that turned out to be logistical nightmares would find his divinity quietly questioned by the very bureaucrats who prostrated before him. This duality is the key to understanding his entire day. He oscillated constantly between two modes, the icon and the administrator. The icon had to be perfect, static, eternal. The administrator had to be shrewd, adaptable, and occasionally ruthless. The art of kingship was performing the first role so convincingly that it sanctified the often messy realities of the second. Soon, the sound of a distant gong or the soft call of a priest would signal the transition. The brief, quasi-human interlude was over. The regalia was checked and adjusted. The formal beard was reattached. The crook and flail were placed back in his hands. His face settled into the serene, distant expression suitable for a living god holding court. He was ready to move from the green room to the main stage. He would process into the great columned hall of the palace. The air here was different from the temple, less smoky, but thick with the scent of human anticipation and polished wood. The courtiers, nobles, provincial governors, and foreign supplicants were already arranged in strict order of precedence. As he entered, a wave of motion swept the room, not a bow, but a full prostration, a sea of bodies melting to the floor until only the glittering figure on the dais remained vertical. He would ascend to his throne. It was often placed on a low platform, not to tower over people, but to elevate the sacred object that was his person. The throne itself was a masterpiece of political art. The legs were often carved as lion's paws, symbolizing the king's strength and his role as the protector who tramples Egypt's enemies. The arms might be the wings of a protective vulture or falcon. The backrest sometimes showed the god of the air, Shu, separating the earth from the sky, a reminder that the pharaoh himself was the pillar holding up the world. He would sit, the court would rise, and in that silence, before the first petition was read, the weight of the entire theatrical, bureaucratic, divine enterprise would settle upon him. He was the axle around which the wheel of the state turned. Every lawsuit, every land grant, every military promotion, every trade agreement, would now flow through him. He had to listen, appear omniscient, and render judgments that felt both instantly just and preordained by the cosmos. All before lunch, and this was just the formal, public facing of his administrative duty. The real work, the endless scrolls of census data, tax records, inventory lists, expedition reports, that was handled by the army of scribes in the halls and offices radiating out from this central chamber. Their reed pens scratched constantly, translating the will of the God King into the mundane language of quotas, rations, and work assignments. He was the apex of a pyramid not of stone, but of paperwork. His divine word was the spark, but it was the bureaucracy that turned that spark into the fire that baked the bricks, fed the workers, and moved the mountains. So, as he prepared to hear the first case of the day, a dispute over the inheritance of a herd of goats between two minor nobles from the Delta, he wasn't just being a judge. He was performing Ma'at. He was demonstrating that under the eye of Horus, even the smallest, most mundane quarrel could be resolved according to the eternal principles of truth and balance. The goats were irrelevant. The performance of perfect justice was everything. And with a slight gesture of the flail, the day's governance would begin. Let's pause for a moment on that gesture. The slight, almost imperceptible lift of the flail, the asterisk nekaka, in his hand. It's not a dramatic pointing of a scepter. It's a faint twitch of the wrist, a movement so small it could be missed by someone in the back of the hall. But in the absolute silence of the court, with every eye laser focused on that glittering figure, it is as good as a thunderclap. The flail, you see, isn't just a symbol of threshing wheat or beating enemies, though it carries those connotations too. In this context, in this moment of adjudication, it is the instrument that separates truth from falsehood, grain from chaff. Its movement signals a decision has been made. The divine intellect has processed the facts, weighed them on the scales of Ma'at, and rendered a verdict. The scribe at the foot of the dais, who has been frozen with his pen poised over a fresh patch of papyrus, now scratches frantically. Year 12, third month of Pharaoh, day 5. Under the majesty of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Nebmeter, given life forever. The case of the herdsman Khnum-hotep versus the herdsman Ihy concerning 7 goats. His Majesty decrees, the goats are to be given to Khnum-hotep. It is done, and it is done. No appeal, no higher court. The judgment of the living God is the end of the legal road. The vizier will likely nod to a guard, who will gently guide the losing party, Ihy, in this case, out of the hall before his disappointment can curdle into anything resembling protest in the sacred space. Khnum-hotep, the winner, will be prostrating himself again, murmuring thanks not just to the king but to the principle of cosmic order he embodies. This scene will repeat, dozens of times. A boundary dispute between 2 temple estates. A petition from a caravan leader for royal protection on a journey to the turquoise mines of Sinai. A report from a Nile fortress commander about the movements of nomadic tribes. Each one is a pebble dropped into the pond of the king's attention. His role is not to dive into the minutiae of every pebble, but to ensure the surface of the pond, the state itself, remains calm and orderly. He listens to the summaries offered by the vizier or the specialized scribe of the corresponding department. His responses are formulaic, almost liturgical. Let it be as the overseer of the granaries advises. Grant the protection, and assign 10 Medjai warriors to the caravan. Send reinforcements to the fortress, and remind the commander of his duty to patrol. Between these petitions, offerings are presented, not just from foreign envoys, but from his own officials. A nomarch from the Fayum region presents a basket of perfect, first-fruit figs. The chief goldsmith of the palace workshop presents a newly crafted ceremonial dagger, its handle inlaid with lapis. The master of the royal kennels leads in a sleek, nervous greyhound, a gift for the king's hunt. These are not bribes, in the crude sense. They are tangible affirmations of the economic and artistic bounty that flows towards the throne, the center of all things. They are proof that the system is working. The king accepts each with a nod. The objects are taken away by attendants to be recorded in the treasury ledgers. The greyhound will be fed and trained. The figs will likely end up as part of the next divine offering, cycling back into the ritual economy. By now, the sun has climbed high. The light in the columned hall grows sharp and hot, cutting in dusty bars through the high, slit windows. The air, despite the architectural attempts to keep it cool, grows warm and still, carrying the mingled scents of perfumed oil, human sweat, and the faint, dry smell of papyrus. Nebmeter has been sitting, perfectly upright, for what feels like an epoch. The crown is a persistent, focused weight. The collar presses on his collarbones. The throne offers no lumbar support. His mind, which must remain alert to project divine wisdom, is likely beginning to drift into a kind of hypnotic state, punctuated by the rhythmic rise and fall of petitioners' voices. This is where the sheer physical endurance of kingship comes in. We think of pharaohs as depicted in statues, eternally youthful, virile, relaxed. But the reality of the daily performance required the stamina of a marathon runner and the posture of a stone statue. A slight slump, a weary rub of the temple, a glance at the sun's position, any of these could be read by the watching court as a sign of divine displeasure or, worse, mortal weakness. So he sits, and he listens, and he gestures with the flail. It is during this long, droning session that we might see a rare, almost invisible crack in the facade. Perhaps a trusted cupbearer, a young man who has served him since childhood, approaches between cases with a shallow gold cup. The king accepts it, his fingers brushing the servants for a fraction of a second. He takes a small sip of cool, honeyed wine, diluted with water. It's not enough to inebriate, just enough to moisten a throat parched from hours of silence and ritual utterances. As he drinks, his eyes, for just a moment, might meet those of the cupbearer. There is no smile, no nod of familiarity. But in that fleeting, human exchange, the recognition of one person by another, the godhood recedes a millimeter. It's a sip of reality, a tiny, clandestine break in the performance. Then the cup is taken away, the mask resettles, and the next petitioner is called forward. The morning audience finally grinds to a halt, not with a bang, but with the soft, authoritative voice of the chief ritual priest. He has been standing at the edge of the dais, a living chronometer. He intones a short hymn to the sun at its zenith. This is the signal. The court understands. The king's divine energy, like the sun's, is at its peak but must now begin its symbolic journey. The public facing of justice is concluded. As the courtiers and officials begin their backed-out procession from the hall, the machinery of the king's person begins to whir into action again. He rises. The act of standing after such prolonged stillness must be its own small ordeal. He processes out, not to his private chambers for rest, but to the next scheduled event. The day is only half done, and the god has many parts yet to play. The transition from the judicial Horus to the priestly son of Re is seamless, a change of costume and venue, but never a break in character. He is led to a smaller, adjacent chamber, a robing room of sorts. Here, the heavy state collar might be exchanged for a lighter one. The double crown, thank the gods, might be removed and placed on a stylized wooden stand shaped like a head, where it stares blankly at the wall. In its place, a simpler Neme's headcloth is tied, the striped lappets falling over his shoulders. The leopard skin cloak is adjusted. He is being reconfigured from the dispenser of earthly law to the intermediary of heavenly favor. The next item on the divine agenda is often a foundation ceremony or an inspection. Let's say today it's the laying of the final cornerstone for a new temple to Ptah, the creator god of Memphis. The procession reforms, shorter this time, and winds its way from the palace to a cleared site near the city's great Ptah temple. A crowd is held back by guards. Priests of Ptah stand around a prepared pit, chanting. The king's role is blessedly active after the sedentary morning. He is handed a ceremonial tool, a wooden hoe, its blade tipped with copper. He steps forward and, with a few ritual strokes, breaks the ground for the foundation deposit. Attendants then place a small box in the hole containing model tools, a sample of the temple's planned building materials, and an inscribed plaque naming Nebmeter as the temple's founder. The king then scatters a handful of clean sand over the deposit, a gesture of creation, of bringing order from chaos. He might recite a formula. I have struck the earth for you, I have leveled the ground for you, O Ptah, south of his wall. It's symbolic, almost theatrical. He won't lift another tool. The actual construction will be done by thousands of workers over the next decade. But his ritual act has sanctified the entire project. From this moment on, every brick laid, every column raised, is an extension of that first, kingly strike of the hoe. His energy is now embedded in the very earth of the site. He stands there for a moment, surveying the marked-out ground, the lines of string showing where walls will rise. The chief priest of Ptah murmurs in his ear about the grandeur of the planned columned hall, the statue that will be carved. Nebmeter nods. He is thinking, perhaps, not of theology, but of logistics. Of the quarry orders, the payroll for the artisans, the grain to feed them. The God King is once again the project manager. But he cannot voice these thoughts. He can only look solemn, authoritative, and divinely pleased. Then, as the sun begins its undeniable slide toward the west, the signal is given. The procession turns back toward the palace. The public, ritual part of the afternoon is concluding. But for Nebmeter, the most delicate, and in some ways most perilous, part of the day is yet to come, the transition from the public god to the private individual, and the preparation for the encroaching, symbolic vulnerability of night. The procession back from the temple foundation site is quieter, more subdued. The noonday sun has passed its brutal zenith, and a kind of heavy, golden languor settles over Memphis. The dust kicked up by the royal entourage hangs in the slanting light, turning the air into a visible, slow-moving substance. For Nebmeter, the return to the palace walls feels less like a triumphal entry and more like a retreat into a sanctum. The public performances, the high priest, the judge, the founder, are done. What remains are the duties that exist in the liminal space between his divine office and his mortal frame. He is ushered not into the grand audience halls, but into the more secluded administrative heart of the palace, the house of the royal documents. This is a maze of smaller, whitewashed rooms, their shelves buckling under the weight of papyrus scrolls stored in leather cases or stacked in neat, dusty piles. The air here is different, dry, papery, smelling of ink and the subtle decay of flax. It is the smell of bureaucracy, the true, unscented engine of the kingdom. Here, the vizier and a handful of the most senior scribes await him. This is the sunset briefing, a daily review of matters deemed too sensitive, too complex, or too tedious for the public audience. The king settles onto a simple, backless stool, a shocking contrast to the formal throne. The weight of the Means head cloth is still present, but it feels lighter, almost casual in this context. A scribe offers him a cup of plain, cool water. He drinks, and the act feels human, necessary, not ritualistic. The vizier unrolls a scroll. His tone shifts from the public, declamatory style to a quieter, more conversational register. The topics are the granular threads that, if pulled, could unravel the tapestry of the state. The caravan from Punt has sent a runner ahead from the oasis of Karga. The vizier begins, his finger tracing a line on a map sketched on the papyrus. They report bandit activity along the southern route. The headman suggests diverting the frankincense shipment along the Red Sea coast, but that adds 2 weeks to the journey and requires bribes to the local chieftains. Nebmeter listens, his eyes on the map. He is no longer a symbol, he is a strategist. What is the value of the shipment? He asks, his voice a dry, quiet rasp after hours of silence. Substantial, majesty, 20 donkey loads of pure resin, myrrh saplings, and electrum. A pause. The king's mind weighs the cost of delay and bribes against the risk of loss. He thinks of the temple rituals that require that frankincense, of the political message sent if a royal caravan is plundered. Grant the extra provisions for the coastal route, he says finally. But instruct the caravan master that the bribes are to come from his own profit share. The royal treasury will not pay for the desert's lawlessness. It's a practical, somewhat cynical decision. The God King has just approved a minor extortion payment. Next comes a report on the pyramid town. The scribe of the granaries reads from a list. The workers' ration of bread and beer is holding steady, but the physician-priests report an increase in complaints of eye infections from the limestone dust. They request an increase in the allotment of salted fish, believing its properties help. There is also a petition from the quarrymen at Hera, who are cutting the fine white casing stones. They request a new set of copper chisels, as their current ones are worn down to nubs. These are the unglamorous fundamentals of building an eternity machine. Nebmeter approves the fish and the chisels without hesitation. A sick or ill-equipped worker is an inefficient one, and the pyramid's progress is the heartbeat of his legacy. His approvals are noted with quick scratches of the pen. This is kingship as supply chain management. Then, a more delicate matter. The vizier's voice drops even lower. A letter from the high priest of Amun at Thebes, borne by a personal envoy who awaits in the guest quarters. Thebes, with its powerful and increasingly independent priesthood of the state god Amun, is a constant, low-grade political headache for a Memphite king. He offers effusive praises for your piety and the prosperity of your reign. He then, gently reminds the throne of the promise made by your revered father to grant the Theban temple an additional 5 aruras of prime riverland for its sustenance. The scroll of the promise is cited. Nebmuter's expression does not change, but attention enters the room. This is not about fish or chisels. This is about the balance of power, about a wealthy priestly corporation testing the limits of royal authority. To deny the claim is to risk offending Amun's powerful clergy, to stir whispers of impiety. To grant it is to acknowledge that a temple can hold a king to his father's promises, and to lose valuable taxable land. He is silent for a long moment. He is thinking of the armies, of the treasury, of the subtle art of appearing magnanimous while conceding nothing of real power. Send a reply, he says, his tone measured. Express our profound joy at the health of the high priest and the continued favor of Amun. Inform him that our heart is generous, but the matter of royal land grants is under a full review by the treasury to ensure the equitable sustenance of all the gods' houses. A decision will be made in due course, in accordance with Ma'at. It's a masterpiece of bureaucratic deflection. He has neither agreed nor refused. He has created a delay, a procedural fog. The envoy will return to Thebes with polite words and no deed to the land. The game will continue. This goes on. Reports on the Nile's inundation levels from the Nilometers at Elephantine. A complaint from a royal shipyard about the quality of cedar from Lebanon. The marriage prospects for a minor royal daughter. Each item is a thread. His job is not to pull on them, but to ensure they are woven securely into the fabric of the state. As the last scroll is re-rolled and tied, the light in the document room has grown soft and amber. The business of the day is, officially, over. But for the pharaoh, there is no, off the clock. There is only a change of venue and a shift in the nature of the performance. He is conducted to his private apartments. This is not the stark, ceremonial bedchamber where he will later sleep, but a suite of rooms meant for the twilight hours. Here, the atmosphere shifts again. The air is scented with lotus flowers floating in shallow bowls of water. The walls are painted with serene marsh scenes, herons, papyrus clumps, gentle waters, a visual escape from the geometric rigidity of statecraft. Here, he might encounter his family, not as a formal court appearance, but as close to an intimate gathering as is possible in the goldfish bowl of royalty. His great royal wife, who likely grew up with him in this same palace, might be present. Conversation is still formal, revolving around their children's progress, the health of the royal nursery, the behavior of a certain courtier. It is partnership as a dynastic enterprise. Affection, if it exists, is expressed through the language of duty and legacy. She might update him on the progress of their eldest son's military training, or the negotiations for their daughter's marriage to a prince of an allied city-state in the Levant. He listens, offers a quiet opinion. It is governance at the most personal level. He might see his younger children. They are brought in by nurses and tutors, scrubbed and dressed in fine linen. They will perform a respectful bow, not the full prostration. He might ask the crown prince to recite a lesson from the instruction of Taotep * on leadership. The boy's voice, high and careful, fills the room. Nebmuter listens, his face giving nothing away. Is he assessing the boy's intelligence, his bearing, his potential to one day hold the crushing weight of the peas chent? Or is he, for a fleeting second, simply a father hearing his son's voice? The two realities are inseparable, and the father is always subsumed by the king. A simple evening meal is served here, in the private apartment. It is still inspected for purity, but it is less extravagant than the earlier feast. He might eat a bowl of stewed lentils and duck, some bread, a few figs. He might share it with his wife. It is a moment of quiet. But the quiet is not empty. It is filled with the unspoken weight of the day, with the knowledge of the decisions made, the problems deferred, the constant, vigilant performance of being the pillar of heaven and earth. And as the last of the light fades from the high windows, as the blue of evening seeps into the sky, the final, most profound transition begins. The time to prepare for the vulnerability of night, for the journey through the duat, is approaching. The leisurely atmosphere tightens once more into ritual precision. The private man must be dismantled, so the divine vessel can be made ready for its most perilous and essential duty, to travel through the realm of death while still alive, and to ensure the sun is reborn by morning. The soft blues of twilight deepen into the indigo of evening. The moment of personal quiet, such as it was, is over. Nebmeter finishes the last fig from his simple meal and a change comes over the attendants in the room. Their movements, which had a slightly relaxed efficiency, become more reverent, more deliberate. It is time for the unmaking. A senior priest of the royal household, one whose specific duty is the rights of the sleeping king, enters the private chamber. He carries a small cedar box. His presence is the signal. The mood shifts from familial to sacral. The king's wife, if present, will rise and perform a formal bow before withdrawing. The children are ushered out. The room is cleared of all but the most essential ritual personnel. This is not the main bedtime ritual, that will come later in the formal bedchamber. This is the prelude, the gentle unwinding of the day's public persona. The priest opens the box. Inside, on a bed of linen, are simple alabaster jars of oil and a small, sharp flint knife. The first thing to be removed is the Neen's head cloth. The striped fabric is carefully unwound from the royal head. For the first time since dawn, Nebmeter's own hair is exposed, likely cropped short for cleanliness and comfort under the heavy regalia. The physical sensation must be profound, a literal lightening. Next, the jewelry. The broad collar is lifted from his shoulders, its weight leaving a temporary pressure mark on his skin. The armbands, the bracelets, the rings are all taken off, each piece placed silently in a lined basket to be cleaned and readied for tomorrow. The leopard skin cloak is lifted away. He is left in his simple, white linen kilt. Then, the priest approaches with the flint knife. This is a moment of profound symbolic vulnerability. The king's bodily fluids, his sweat, the microscopic flakes of his skin, are considered potent, dangerous if they fall into the wrong hands. They are also a part of his divine essence. The priest uses the edge of the knife not to cut, but to scrape. He gently scrapes the king's skin, collecting the oils, the salt, the day's accumulation into a small lump of sacred natron salt held in his other hand. This mixture, now charged with the king's essence, will be ritually disposed of later, buried in a protected place to prevent its use in malign magic. The king is being sanitized, not just physically, but spiritually. The dross of the day, the mortal residue of decision-making and human contact, is being removed. After the scraping comes the anointing. Fresh, cool oils, lotus and ben oil, are smoothed over his skin, replacing what was taken. It is a soothing, almost clinical process. He is being prepared like a sacred object being readied for storage. His face is washed clean of the last traces of green and black paint. The kohl is carefully wiped from around his eyes. With each wipe, the iconic, godlike mask dissolves. The face that emerges is a man's face. Tired, perhaps with lines of tension around the eyes that the paint had hidden. Now, dressed in a fresh, even simpler linen shift, he is conducted from the private apartment through a series of increasingly silent corridors to his official bedchamber. This room is not meant for comfort, it is a ritual space. The bed is a wooden frame with a lattice of leather straps, little more than a symbolic platform. The walls are often inscribed with protective spells from the pyramid texts or coffin texts, a kind of magical armor painted in hieroglyphs. Images of the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet, who can bring both plague and healing, might glare from the corners, guarding the vulnerable sleeper. The room feels less like a bedroom and more like a sealed, sacred crypt for the living. Here, the final priests are waiting. The atmosphere is hushed, intense. The king lies down on the bed. His posture is formal, hands at his sides are crossed over his chest in the Osirian position of the dead. This is intentional. In sleep, his ba, his mobile personality, and his ka, his life force, will separate from his body. His body will lie here, inert as a corpse, while his spiritual components undertake the night's work. The chief ritual priest begins to speak. His voice is a low, hypnotic monotone, reciting the potent spells of protection and guidance. He is not speaking to the king, he is speaking to the demons of the dark, to the chaotic serpent Apophis who attacks the sun bark each night, and to the benevolent gods who must guide the king's spirit. O you who are awake while the god sleeps, who guard the flesh, do not let the Red One have power over him, do not let the Evil One draw near to him, the priest chants. May his ba go forth to the sky, may his body be renewed on earth. Incense burns, a heavy, soporific scent of myrrh and juniper, meant to repel evil spirits and induce a state conducive to spiritual travel. Other priests might place small amulets, a wedged eye for protection, a jade pillar for stability, under the bed or at the four corners of the room. For Nebmeter, lying there in the flickering lamplight, this must be the strangest moment of the day. The relentless performance, the decisions, the weight of expectation, it all falls away, but it is replaced not by rest, but by a mandated, perilous journey. He is not going to sleep to dream. He is going to sleep to work. His spirit must navigate the treacherous waterways of the duat, the underworld. He must pass through the 12 gates, recite the correct spells to the bizarre, animal-headed guardians, avoid the lakes of fire and the pits of negation. He must, according to the theology, rally alongside the sun god Re in the nightly battle against Apophis, helping to hew the serpent into pieces so the sun can be reborn at dawn. He will stand before the tribunal of Osiris and have to assert his righteousness, proving that he has upheld Ma'at during his waking hours, so that he may be spiritually regenerated. The pressure is unimaginable, even his sleep is state-sponsored, a critical part of cosmic maintenance. A bad night's sleep, a failure of his ba to navigate correctly, could mean spiritual disorientation, a weakening of his divine power, or worse, a failure to aid Re, leading to a literal end of the world. No wonder the spells for a peaceful sleep were a major industry. The priest's chant winds down. The lamps are extinguished one by one, until only a single, small flame in a protective niche remains, a token of the sun that is now fighting for its life in the netherworld. The priests back out of the room, closing the heavy wooden door. A seal of clay, stamped with the king's cartouche, might be pressed over the latch from the outside. He is now entombed in silence and darkness. And here, in the absolute black, the performance finally, truly stops. The icon is alone. The body on the bed is just a body, breathing in the dark. The mind, perhaps, can finally let go of the script. But what does it think of? Does it replay the day's judgments, worry over the Theban priest's implied threat, fret about the pyramid's progress? Or does it, in this one unobserved moment, wander to purely human trivialities? A remembered scent from the gardens, the sound of a particular lute, the feel of the Nile water at dawn. We cannot know. Outside, the palace is not asleep. Guards patrol. Scribes in the house of documents work by lamplight on tomorrow's scrolls. Priests in the temple maintain the hourly vigil, chanting to keep the flame of the world alive. The machinery of the god-king hums on, even as its central cog lies motionless. For several hours, there is only darkness and the slow, steady breath of the king. Then, in the deepest part of the night, a faint change. Perhaps his breathing hitches. His eyes move beneath their lids. In Egyptian belief, this is the sign his ba has returned, having successfully completed its nocturnal circuit. It flutters like a bird back into his body, bringing with it the renewed energy of the justified dead and the victorious sun. An hour before dawn, there is a soft scratching at the door. The clay seal is broken. The priests and the chief of the scented oils re-enter silently. They see the king still lying there. But in their eyes, he is not a man waking up. He is a god who has conquered death once more. The sun is about to be reborn, and with it, the living Horus must be reassembled to play his part. A cool cloth is placed on his forehead. The morning anointing oil is warmed over a tiny flame. The first words are whispered, not to him, but for him. Awake in peace, O pure one. Awake in peace. Nebmeter's eyes open. He sees the familiar painted spells on the ceiling, the faint, gray pre-dawn light seeping into the room. The journey is over. The night shift has ended. He has survived the duat. The world has not ended. And now, the most ordinary day for a god begins again. The first ritual touch of the oil to his skin is the first step in the meticulous, sleep-inducing process of building a deity from a man, of preparing the axis of the world to shoulder its burden for another endless, perfectly repeated, divinely monotonous day.